Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to completely redefine everything you thought you knew about willpower. We're breaking down the biological automation of discipline, and we're going to show you exactly how to stop fighting what is basically an unwinnable war against your own mind. Because, let's face it, your brain, it usually wins that fight. So if you've ever felt like your brain is actively sabotaging your absolute biggest goals, well, you're in exactly the right place. Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We're covering 1, the willpower myth, 2, upgrading motivation, 3, the discipline equation, 4, engineering your environment, and finally, 5, neural automation. This journey is going to take us from the trap of relying on weak, fleeting motivation all the way to that ultimate boss level, where doing hard things becomes as effortless as breathing. So starting off with level 1, the willpower myth, why force fails. Let's look at why relying on sheer force of will is actually a guaranteed biological recipe for failure. We've all felt it, right? You set your alarm early. You are highly motivated to attack the day. But then, when that alarm actually goes off, boom, this heavy blanket of fatigue just weighs you down and your discipline completely evaporates overnight. You hit snooze. So why does this happen? Well, science tells us it's not because you're lazy, and it's definitely not a character flaw. It's actually just a matter of brain chemistry and architecture. Inside your head, there's this constant, ongoing battle. When you make a plan to go to the gym or study, that decision comes from your prefrontal cortex. You can think of it as the logical president of your brain. But here's the catch. This president is fighting a constant, exhausting war against your amygdala and limbic system. Those are your emotional centers, and honestly, they just want comfort, Netflix, and a warm bed. The crucial point here is that willpower is absolutely not an infinite resource. It operates exactly like a biological battery. Every single time your prefrontal cortex says no to a distraction, it burns energy. Over the course of the day, you experience cognitive fatigue. This perfectly explains why, say, if you go to a supermarket after a long day of making decisions, your brain is just way too tired to resist junk food. By the time you hit the checkout counter, your prefrontal cortex just gives up, and you end up throwing a candy bar or, let's be real, maybe 3, onto the belt. You haven't suddenly lost your morals, you've literally just drained your battery. Let's move to level 2, upgrading motivation, changing the fuel. We need to prevent that battery fatigue in the first place. Think about the fuel you're currently using. Most of us run on extrinsic motivation, things like money, status, or fear of punishment. This is essentially fossil fuel. It gives you a temporary dopamine spike to get you launched, sure, but it quickly burns out and leaves you totally exhausted. On the flip side, we have intrinsic motivation. Now, this is like a self-sustaining fusion reactor. When you act for the pure joy of the activity itself, you don't drain your battery. Instead, your motivation actually compounds, making hard work feel incredibly easy. To achieve that effortless flow state, you've got to deliberately dial up these 5 intrinsic motivators in your work. You need curiosity to learn, mastery to improve, purpose to see the bigger picture, and autonomy to feel in control. But a massive game changer here is number 3, autotelete. This basically means doing tasks you're uniquely good at, where the activity itself is the reward. When you align your daily tasks with these 5 motivators, your brain starts flooding with neurochemicals like dopamine and endorphins that literally force you to crave the work. All right, level 3 is all about the discipline equation, balancing the math of our daily actions. If you want to know why you can easily sit through a 4-hour podcast but somehow can't focus on studying for 10 minutes, well, it all comes down to this exact calculation. Your brain subconsciously calculates the subjective importance of the goal, adds the psychological enjoyment of doing it, and then subtracts the friction or effort required. If the final number is positive, you do the task. But if the friction is too high or the enjoyment is too low, you hit an absolute brick wall. Aligning this equation isn't just about making things fun, though. You really have to ask yourself, what pain do you want in your life? What are you willing to struggle for? Elite discipline is found when you figure out exactly what kind of pain and grind you're willing to swallow, simply because the importance of the goal completely outweighs the friction of getting there. This brings us to level 4, engineering environment, eliminating friction. This is where we start to eliminate the need for willpower entirely by taking a hard look at our physical and digital surroundings. We usually think of discipline as a force we exert on the world, but actually, discipline is an input you receive from your environment. Trying to do deep, focused work with a smartphone buzzing right next to you? That's like trying to meditate in the middle of a heavy metal concert.
You're fighting products engineered by thousands of brilliant minds, backed by billions of dollars, specifically designed to trigger a behavioral addiction. If you rely on willpower here, your battery is going to drain in minutes.
So how do we actually fix this? Well, science gives us an incredibly powerful tool called MCII. First, you vividly visualize your goal. Second, you realistically imagine the exact obstacles that will get in your way. And third, you create an if-then script. For example, if I get distracted while studying, then I will stand up and walk around the room for 1 minute. By preloading these if-then decisions into your brain, you can skyrocket your task completion rate by a massive 60%. You aren't just hoping for the best anymore, you're pre-programming the rules of your environment. You have to physically design your environment to manipulate that discipline equation. You must lower the friction for good habits and raise it for bad ones. If an entrepreneur wants to practice DJing but keeps their equipment packed away in a closet, the friction is just way too high. They won't do it. But if the deck is plugged in on the kitchen counter just one button away, they'll practice for hours. The exact same goes for fitness. Put your gym clothes right next to your bed so it's the absolute path of least resistance the second you wake up. Finally, we reach the scariest, most elite level of our progression. Level 5, neural automation, reprogramming the brain. This is where you don't even have to think about discipline anymore. When you repeat your environmental cues enough times, something truly magical happens. The decision-making burden shifts away from that easily exhausted prefrontal cortex. It moves deeper into the brain, right into the striatum and the basal ganglia. These are your automation centers. This is where brushing your teeth or typing your computer password lives. Once a behavior enters this system, there's no more emotional negotiation. You don't ask yourself if you feel like doing it. Your brain just runs the script. So the crucial point is how you lock this in. First, remove choice entirely. Never decide if you'll do something, only when and where. Second, be willing to underperform on purpose. A short, terrible workout is infinitely better for your brain's wiring than skipping a heroic one. Third, protect the cue. If it's 8 a.m. at your desk, you sit there, regardless of your mood. Over time, you achieve emotional immunity. Elite performers look cold to the outside world because they aren't relying on intense, cortisol-spiking hype. They've totally decoupled their thoughts from their actions. Laziness, fear, and boredom definitely still exist in their minds, but those emotions have zero authority over their physical actions. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with a choice. Are you going to wake up tomorrow and wage another exhausting, unwinnable war against your own mind? Or are you ready to use the neuroscience we just covered to stop fighting, build your system, and let your brain start winning for you automatically? The choice is entirely yours.